Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I are going to be exploring, adventuring through Weirdwood Manor. That is the place, and it is the game. This is a new game from Mike Cassie and Grey Ridge Games. It's a cooperative game, and unlike a lot of cooperative games that have a fairly simple rule set, I mean, this one has a lot of Euro-y mechanics going on, in my opinion. There's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You've got hand management, you've got action selection, resource management, a lot of things going on that you don't typically see in a lot of straightforward co-ops.
Well, I would say that this is a game with a lot of puzzles.
Yes.
And I think that that actually really fits very well with the thematic theme of the game. Obviously, we said Weirdwood Manor. What you're thinking is probably what this game is. It's a weird manor with a bunch of spooky stuff that's happening, and you are, I want to say, adventurers. You're all these different types of characters. There's magic and fantasy and all this stuff coming together in this manor, and you're trying to complete an objective. Of course, that objective is going to be variable. There's several different, what I might call bosses or monsters.
Yeah, Fey monsters.
Fey monsters that you can challenge during the game, and based on the monster that you select, you're going to have a different setup. You're going to have some different rules, some different objectives that inform these puzzles. But at the heart of the game, like David said, all of these mechanics kind of work together in a very puzzling way. How many times can I say puzzle during this video? Probably
Yes,
a few more.
It is quite puzzling, and it should be said, I'm not familiar with the property, but this is based on something. There are books and or I think even app games existing in the Weirdwood universe. So the universe that they've created here, and the artwork, must be said, is really, really nice. Here on the table, you'll see not quite everything, but this big round board is Weirdwood Manor. It's got a lot of variable rooms that are put into these various levels of this circle. It's got a couple of rotating wheels here that represent the time of day and the days that pass throughout the game, because a lot of times you're going to be racing against the clock. And then over here you have the monster. We picked the Chaos Ogre for our game, but there are a couple others with completely different and variable boards. Think something along the lines of like Horrified Plus.
Yeah, I was going to say plus maybe even,
like
a step up for sure.
Horrified, I only want to use that comparison because there's different monsters and the monsters operate very differently, and it's cooperative, but there's quite a bit more going on here. And then here we've got a row of companions that we can recruit to join us and sit by our player boards, which you don't see on screen, but with this picture you'll see the player board is quite robust too. There are 3 experience tracks that you can go up, unlocking bonuses, and you can gain experience in a number of different ways throughout this game. And each character is going to have some variable powers, along with a little track here that tracks their health, as well as a track that kind of shows the progression of the dice that they've forged, because you're going to be rolling dice when you get into combat with both the monster and these scarabs that are all over the board.
Yeah, and like David said, every character does have special abilities and different costs even for the way they unlock their dice, and different bonuses they're going to earn on their tracks, and different decks of cards even. And these decks are kind of the heart of the game. These action cards are going to control what you can do on your turn, and there's a variety of different actions. There's moving, there's fighting, there's gaining resources. There's some action cards that just affect the game in different ways by powering you up, by powering up other players, and things like that. Playing these cards and managing your hand is a huge part of the game, because every action card that you play is going to move the timetable of the game forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's the one mandatory thing you have to do on your turn, is to play one of these cards. And there's some optional actions as well, but like Ryan said, when you play a card, you're going to play it above your player board in one of these spots. There's a morning, afternoon, evening, and night spot at the beginning. There may be more once you get companions, but when you play it in the morning, you have to move this inside dial at least one space to the next morning spot, which you can see I did from here to here. But had I played it at night, I would have had to rotate that almost all the way around back to the night space, meaning that on Ryan's turn, when he advanced it even just a little bit, we would then move the day forward as well. And you only have so many days to actually win the game, and as the days go on, the Fey monster, at least in the case of the Chaos Ogre, got stronger and stronger.
Now, something else that you might have noticed as we're spinning these dials that you kind of have to look a little closer to see is as you're moving the time, you're also moving around the doorways that lead into different rooms. So some rooms become inaccessible at certain parts of the day. And on the outer ring here, as the days move, the doorways shift from day to day as well. So it does lean into this idea that this manor is always changing, because when you move, you can follow your path to anywhere you want to go. But a huge part of the puzzle of deciding where to place that card isn't just managing how much time you're spending, but also making sure that the dials all line up in a place that lets you actually even get into the room you want to go to. All of these rooms have very, very powerful actions, and if you can end your movement on one of those rooms, you get to do the effect. Of course, that's a lot harder to do than it sounds.
Yeah, the effects are wide-ranging. They do all sorts of different things, and like Ryan said, you're going to have access to some of the rooms, and in fact, some cases, you might find yourself after your last turn stuck in a room for your turn. So that makes it important to have cards in your hand that allow you to remain flexible, because the cards themselves, when you play them after advancing the time, you're going to use the effect of the card. Now, like Ryan said, these cards might say you can move. Yep. Some of the cards don't allow you to move. Some of the cards just allow you to maybe gather some resources. So if you do find yourself stuck in a room and you can't move anyway, you could just play that card and use the resources. The other cool thing about playing these cards is as you play them, there are these little connection icons that will actually give you the ongoing benefit that's pictured if you can match them up just right. So in this case, if I needed to spend knowledge, which is the little green token, I'm going to have a free knowledge to spend all the time as long as these cards remain here. Because as you play the game, and once you have cards filling your spaces, at the end of that turn, you need to sort of clean things up. You're going to take all those cards away. Yeah. You're going to add more scarabs to the board, and the scarabs, along with the monster, are part of what you're fighting against.
Yeah, they start with the board populated out here, and you're going to see not really a starting setup. We have kind of played the game already, so you're going to see how we ended up with scarabs kind of spread out across the board. But they kind of start at the center and then spread their way out. And they do a lot of different things, but the main thing they do is interrupt your movement. Every time you encounter a scarab, you have to stop. Also, if there are more than 2 scarabs in a room, they blight it, they close off the room. Even if you could access it, you can't use that ability anymore. So not only just managing the monster, you also have to manage these scarabs, stop them from overpopulating, and also try to clear the way so that other players can move through. It really does lean into that cooperative sense of one player maybe going and dealing with all the scarabs so that the other players can use their movement a little more freely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, with the Chaos Ogre, we had a couple things working against us. One of those things was the scarabs, because as they moved around and blighted rooms, the blight track would continue to go up and up and up. If at any time we ever let 8 rooms be blighted at once, we would lose the game. The other thing is, the Chaos Ogre is going after Lady Weirdwood. Lady Weirdwood starts in the throne room, which is in the center of the table, and the Chaos Ogre starts on the outside edge. But we found very quickly that the Chaos Ogre can get to Lady Weirdwood very quickly, because just like us, these characters move as far as they want to or can when they're instructed to wherever they can get, wherever they're wanting to go. And the Chaos Ogre, along with all of the other Fey monsters in the game, they're going to take a turn between every player's turn. So once a player's played a card, moved the dial, done all their actions on their card, then the Chaos Ogre got a turn. We would flip this card right here to find out what's on the back. But before we do, we had a little sneak preview at what was going to happen.
Yeah, that's really nice to have, actually.
It's vital to have, in fact. Because like this one right here says that the Fey monster is going to move. We don't know how it's going to move. We don't know who it's going to be chasing, but we know it's going to move, and it moves the time forward. So the Chaos Ogre's deck will continually move the time forward as well. Then we flip it over and we find out, if he is in the same room with Lady Weirdwood, then he's going to add more scarabs to that room. There's a lot of things, sort of if-then scenarios on the backs of these cards. It might have suggested if he wasn't in that room, he would go as far as he could toward her. He might chase the active player, things like that. So the Chaos Ogre is running all around the board, trying to kill, I'm sorry to say, kill Lady Weirdwood. Defeat. I mean, the rule book says kill.
It does.
I'm just saying. And she can only be attacked like 3 times before we lose.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, she doesn't have much health.
So in this case, the whole time we're having to manage the scarabs and also making sure Lady Weirdwood wasn't taking enough damage so that she met her demise.
Yeah, mitigating the effect of the monster is a huge part of the game. And like this particular monster was pretty straightforward in that we were just doing damage to him. You'll see a number of damage cubes on there. As we take those damage cubes up, he does effects on the board. As the time goes, he gets stronger. But we're mainly just doing battle with him, trying to fight it out by improving our character, rolling dice and going into combat. However, not all of the Fey monsters are like that. Some of them are vastly different. So when you see the health tracker up there, all those red cubes that we're removing, some of the monsters don't even have HP trackers like that. It's just very different for each monster.
Yeah, now we've said that this is a more sort of complex cooperative game, but it is still, I think, very family friendly. Not only is the property somewhat family friendly in that sort of macabre sort of way.
It's never like overtly horror. It's
No.
all kind of done in this this comic-y art style. It's really neat.
Yeah, the art is beautiful, but it comes with a number of other player boards to choose from. We have 6 here in this prototype, but all of the characters you can play are significantly different than one another. I have one that's kind of a jack of all trades. Ryan had one that's leans more towards attack.
Yeah, more towards attack and also supporting other players attacking. Which
Yes.
was, again, these abilities do lean into that co-op sense.
And the other thing I appreciate about this, and I think families will as well, each of these characters had a complexity rating. So I used a complexity rating of 1. I think yours was 2. We started with those, but they go from 1 to 2 to 3, and you can use them a little bit more intricately. I think that's reflected in the powers that they have.
Yeah.
One of them doesn't even have a dice track. Because with that dice track, most characters are going to go to some of these locations where they can forge more dice for when they're attacking scarabs or the Fey creature. But one of the characters, I can't remember their name, they actually don't have that dice track where they're not collecting dice. They actually steal dice from whatever they're attacking.
wow.
So they're going to go up a similar sort of track, but at the beginning of any combat, I think they take some of the dice, depending on how far they've forged up there or how far they've advanced on that track, which is really interesting. That's quite a bit of variability.
Yeah, I think upgrading your player board is huge to being able to win this game. You have to focus a little bit on upgrading and a little bit on actually progressing your objective. And there's 2 other ways to upgrade our player board that we've only really hinted at, one of which being these companion cards, which are great because not only do they give you abilities that are going to help you out during the game, they also give you another slot to play cards. And that's way more helpful than it might sound at first because it gives you 1 extra card play before you have to reset your tableau. And like David mentioned earlier, as you're playing these cards and matching those symbols together, you're getting those benefits throughout your turns. So the longer you can keep those cards out, the better it's going to be. There's even another type of card, these tactics cards, that you can play on top of a card when you play it in order to effectively boost that card, give it better abilities, and turn its icons into wilds. So if you can manage these with your companions, you can build out a tableau that could last for a few turns and give you some significant advantages.
Yeah, on the flip side of that, there are cards, I think Ryan used some in our game, that allowed him to play more cards.
Yeah.
And play more cards. He used a nice little engine that allowed him to play like 3 cards in 1 turn, which is unusual, but what it did was it gave him a big, juicy, big turn, but
Yeah,
it wasn't going to be one that lasted very long.
Right, and that's, I think, a key idea of this game is that you're building into these big turns, you're trying to take these big turns, and that puzzle element, again, of trying to make sure that you're where you need to be when those big turns take place, because it doesn't really matter if you've built up a big turn to attack the monster if you're across the board from the monster. So being able to communicate with your other players and kind of build a plan, I think is a really neat aspect of this game, and also kind of leans into that family element. It's going to encourage table talk, it's going to encourage teamwork, and if you have younger players at the table, it doesn't hurt to kind of help guide them through their turns as well.
Yeah, and whether it's younger players at the table or not, one of the things this game does really, really well, in my opinion, is give satisfying turns. Like Ryan was just saying, on our very first turn of the game, we ran around, and if you can use a couple move actions and go to one room, and whenever you go into a room, you get to do the thing. So you can do that action, and then you go to another room with the second move and do another action. Some of those rooms might actually move you to another room, which would effectively give you a third action. So you could actually take one turn where you just move a couple of places and then end up with a lot more resources than you did before. And now you're ready to go do something else. Use different rooms, or maybe use those resources to forge new dice, things like that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say puzzle one more time before this video is over. Because again, that leads into the puzzle of what time you want it to be, because making those chains, being able to look at that board and have that aha moment of, oh, if I rotate it to the second day spot, that opens these rooms. It is a very satisfying feeling, and you just feel very clever when you find those paths that work for you.
Yeah, and it's a tense cleverness, in fact, because you might move the days so that it opens up the right rooms, but everyone else at the table might be going, we just lost a whole day because you did that. Are we sure that we want to do that? So it's a really interesting, tense co-op. I think it's a co-op. In a world of co-ops that are fairly straightforward, I think this gives Euro gamers a little bit more of what they like in a game when they're playing a co-op.
Definitely stands out in the world of co-ops. It definitely does.
Yeah, so that is Weirdwood Manor. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.